Recording started. So yeah, the conversation is about the responsible usage of Regen as a brand. I suggest to kick it off is like a intro round. So for everybody to have a space to kind of say 2 words about yourself, your connection to Regen, and then maybe try to briefly describe your ideas about what are what should we talk about? What are we talking about? What is the problem? So I'll start and then we'll pass to somebody. Okay. So I guess for me, the inspiration to overall organize the session, it initially started with with the project of Regen Score. I'm working on for half a year now, which is a reputation of on-chain activities that should kind of form your feedback about what you did right on the investment side or donation side or anything else. And yeah, it felt pretty natural to use Regen and ReFi. Like feels like a big trend and booming, but also I got this kind of hope from one of my peers that, hey, maybe we should not call everything Regen, why some behaviors are Regen, why not, it feels like with the spread of this kind of term, not everybody is meaning the same thing, and it might hurt the movement in some ways. So I'm not thinking that we could forbid something from somebody, but between us, we can potentially agree about some what do we mean by here, and try to give an example and try to kind of set a framework about what can be considered Regen and what not. Also, I know Gregory has something with the trademark for that. I think he can speak more about it, but it's also an opportunity to build a connection between the trademark and responsible usage of brand. So that is more of cultural asset, right? And communication asset that we might all benefit from, but also can be harmed through the inconsistent usage. So I'll stop here and pass to Gregory then.
Yeah, great, Max. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, my sense is that it would be really lovely to have a commons, right? And in order for a commons to exist, you actually need to have a clear understanding of, following Eleanor Ostrom's observations, who is a participant in the commons and what are the rules so that you don't degrade a resource. And if we think of Regen as a cultural, spiritual, intellectual resource, social capital resource that emerges out of the trust between us, the integrity, the cooperation, then kind of, yeah, I think there's an opportunity to leverage the old style of, intellectual property essentially to kind of define a commons, and then to use that definition to uplift and engage in sort of managing that common pool resource, which in this case is kind of a cultural, intellectual resource, the cultural capital, intellectual capital, social capital, spiritual capital of the movement. And back in 2017, when we got started with Regen Network, we actually just went ahead and filed a trademark in the United States for the use of Regen in the blockchain, cryptocurrency, and ecosystem service market space. And we received that trademark, and we've already had sort of one successful negotiation to grant usage to Paul Hawken, who has a regeneration project and who wrote Natural Capital and some other things. And he also is interested in this concept of kind of like I don't think any of us are aesthetically or ethically excited about using the trademark as an enclosure tool and an exclusion tool, but more as a commenting tool. And so, I was jamming with Max the other day. I was jamming with Michael Zargum, a month or so ago. I chatted a little bit with Kevin Iwaki and other folks, and just sort of saying hey, we have this trademark. It is a tool that we could use to kind of convene a commons, right? I don't particularly, I'm not suggesting that, Regen Network development is going to start like knocking on people's door and being like, hey, you know, could you not use it, or could you use it in a different way? That doesn't make any sense, right? But what could make sense is if we can kind of offer it, and use it to magnetize a deeper degree of coordination and coherence, and really, you know, perhaps make something of a commons together. So that's kind of the idea. Yeah, just excited to chat a little bit about it. And again, apologies, I'm like in out cars and this, that, and the other, and I'll probably have to cut the call a little short so I can hustle off to be in 3 dimensions with some other humans. But yeah.
Maybe we can pass it to Luke then.
Yeah, I was actually hoping that I would be next. First of all, thanks all for being here. Thanks, Greg, for doing such a good opening. And I think Gregory being here makes this conversation so much more meaningful, because it's not just a theoretical concept that we're going to discuss, but this can lead to practical next steps on how we improve the use of regen. And I think some elements that Gregory mentioned, I think the cultural element of regen, I think is something very critical to help curate, because it will replicate. If you just think about regenerative economics as like a very broad theory, takes the concept of whatever we nurture, we aim to create more of, and creating these feedback loops. I think the more good culture, positive developing culture we can cultivate, the better, as it will have net positive effects in the short term, but even more in the long term. So my background comes from joining DAO back in 2018. This is also where I met Max around the DGOF times. Came in from a impact perspective, as I was running the Caribbean blockchain network by then, researching how we can leverage blockchain for good. It's around this time as well that I got interested in the term regen or regenerative at large. Over the past years, have moved across the space, up and down the stack, have a I wouldn't call it a degen side, but definitely a financial business mind here somewhere in my brain. Come from business school, used to run a DeFi fund, so I know a lot about on-chain finance and how to make a living on-chain. And I'm always trying to kind of find the right sweet spot between the regenerative reality that we want to create and the current systems that we're part of. So I think my contribution for here today, I think, is really trying to find the practical balance, and also what the term means to us and what we hope to achieve with the term in the long run, and kind of working back from there.
Cool. Monty, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I guess one thing that's well, first of all, it's lovely to be in this space and awesome conversation to be having. One thing that's coming to mind for me is this just covers the term regen, right? The abbreviation, the shortening of it. And so it doesn't cover regenerative in that same way, or ReFi. So which is something to consider. I think one of the things I came across this project, Planet ReFi, the other day. They've got like 130K followers on Twitter, and like Leonardo Messi like promoting it. And you look at the website and it's all like degen tokenomics stuff. You can't actually see what positive impact they're having at all. And it's like there's a clear sort of appropriation going on. They're just kind of jumping on the meme. They've clearly raised a lot of funding, and it looks pretty dodgy to me. But so it would be awesome to have some sort of way of, you know, recognizing that. But if we can only discount the use of regen or try and manage that, then it seems like there's maybe a gap there as well. But yeah, anyway, just some thoughts.
Would you mind passing it to somebody?
So Jeremy, go for it. Regens Unite.
This is the vibe. What's up, nerds? I'm Jeremy. I fuck around with Regens Unite, liberating structures, among other things. Around this topic, there's a couple things that are sort of popping up. You know, one is this is, I think, a well-recognized need of the space that is impact. For lack of a better word, validation. right? How is it that we can, use whatever tools there may be to attest to the impact that is created and create a track record for both ourselves and the wider context. One thing that also comes to mind, sort of hearing this anecdote from you, Monty, is, how might we police each other? I mean, a lot of things are sort of, already in the mix in terms of the conversation. Thanks, Gregory, for bringing up the commons. A commons does have a clear boundary around it. It does have dispute resolution. It does have some form of escalating sanctions in order to monitor and secure that boundary. So, I mean, what does it look like? I mean, I don't necessarily aspire to be the police in any way, but that being said, when there is something that is sort of out there that we see getting traction that looks dodgy, how might we actually raise the alarm and let people know that, hey, that's not the vibe? I play around with this meme a lot, like, this is the vibe, like that thing right here, that's it, that's what I'm going for. But the flip side, I think, is just as important. How do we let people know that, like, hey, that shit is not kosher and that's not cool? And we do see some form of appropriation. I mean, when we look at just the space of regenerative agriculture, like the Cargills and Monsanto of the world are already moving to colonize that space. So, how is it that we differentiate what I think we aspire to and bullshit, for lack of a better word? Anybody else?
Monty, I see your hand. If it's a short one,
Yeah,
you
but
can
I
go with
appreciate
it.
other people haven't spoke, so I want to wait if there's anyone else who hasn't spoken who wants to say anything.
Diogo once, I guess.
Hey guys, GM. There's one thing I feel from this conversation is that kind of use the appropriation of the term. It's in a broader sense, appropriations of ecological terms for social uses, be it on tech, be it on money grabbing stuff, being on well-being. I will regenerate first inner self, then I will regenerate, start within, something like that, individual. It's social appropriations, but the term came from ecological science. I guess everybody agrees. And these kind of things happen. It's normal from our culture. We are Web3 ecosystem, right? The trusted seed community. So it's cool, actually, And well, Regen, I like what Monty said. Regen, the short verse, it's already gone. We lost it, I guess. But yeah. But that's okay. Anyway, but maybe we should have one specific for the ecological systemic process of regeneration. Which among circles of people that are like a little bit more ecological savvy, I just call succession, because succession is a process that is tangible. You can see it. It's anyone can do it. Anyone can assess it. Even if the inner self is not good, he can still establish succession and assess succession and follow what he did the years before. If simply schools had this culture of every spring planting for the future, everybody would have done their share and would have their, so it's succession, it's life, it's complexity. That's how life organizes and happens. So I understand that Web3 is in the region, like sustainability, and then region. And yeah, I think it's going to happen the same thing, because it's too broad of a term. So if you want to talk about social stuff, and cool. If you want to define ecological measurements, maybe we should get a more precise term, I think.
I guess we can go then Bruno, Luis, and then jump into the free conversation.
All right, hi guys. One thing that stuck with me when Gregory was speaking is, and I have like a very superficial knowledge of this, but it reminded me of like the B Corp label. And I also like the input that Diogo added of like, okay, I see like you're coming from like a very different perspective and like having done a lot of actual work on the ground. So I just want to thank you for bringing that. And yeah, check.
Luis, you would like to kick it off?
Okay. Thank you, Max. Hey, everyone. I'm Luis. I've been kind of like involved in like working the ReFi space for a year and something, I believe. Yeah, but anyway, I think like the part that would be kind of like more interesting to this. I've been more recently exploring some of the points that I saw as still like some kind of like gaps for the ReFi ecosystem. And a few then, and basically, yeah, kind of like some big points that I see is the conversion of like and the bridging of like all the technology, all the concepts and everything to real world positive impact. And then the other would be like the yeah, working on communication, information, knowledge flows and storage. And basically related to that, I've been kind of like wondering. So for instance, it's if we want to have like a real world positive impact, we need to connect with other people. We need to bring people like that are still not in the ReFi space, give kind of like a sense of what it's about. And yeah, have this kind of like region in which we can communicate what it is in a way that would also interest the person according to their specific kind of like regional interests and fields of work and so on. And I've seen that kind of it's quite challenging like to communicate and to talk about like what ReFi is, for instance, to everyone. What is regenerative finance? And I've seen, I think that a big point of like an important point would be to have some kind of cultural protection, so that like the culture and kind of like things that we yeah, that we cultural like that we can produce things out of the ReFi kind of region culture. And I sense that the region kind of the region naming, the region yeah, movement, I think it fits kind of more to this cultural kind of like realm than for instance ReFi is. And yeah, I mean, kind of like interested in how we can have like talk and yeah, talk a little bit more about like all these terms, about all these terms, like what it means to be part of each one of the movements. Like what does it mean for something to be ReFi? Does it have to have like the financial aspect of it? What does it mean for something like to be region? And like what would be the appropriate kind of like conditions to use each one of the terms, each one of the movements, and to pass the information forward, basically. So kind of interested to see the discussions taking place, and also like interesting to see exactly having the discussion of the terms and so on. That's it.
Okay, cool. I think then now we can just transfer to the dialogue. And I guess it can be free flow. If it feels like too many people want to talk at the same time, we can use this raise hand feature. Just maybe to like final suggestion is like, I guess conceptual approach to the region as a term is very important. And if it translates also during today's call into maybe some ideas about the trademark usage, then it can have even more practical value. Thanks. And I guess Monty had something to say before, so.
Yeah, nice. It's been an interesting discussion. One thing I guess I'd raise is it can be quite easy to spin your wheels trying to define regen, ReFi, these kind of things. There's a lot of different interpretations and things like that. So it can be quite a challenging exercise to like get a concrete definition as to what it is, because people have different interpretations. So that's one side to it. But the other side is it might be easier to start with, okay, what are the ones we can all agree are like serious red flags? And so like, well, there's several, you know, we all represent quite significant communities and organizations in the space that have quite wide-reaching influence potentially in the space that we operate in. And so if we could have like maybe for example, like a Telegram group with representation from leading Web3 ReFi projects, and we call it maybe like Regen Web3 red flags, and we like post a project in there when we think, okay, this is like seriously dodgy, potentially a scam, big misrepresentation, and then from there can decide what to do from there, whether it's just like make sure we don't promote them, or whether we actually want to escalate it and make a public kind of thing of, you know, questioning this project or things like that. So that could be an easier place to start, just to like identify any things where we see serious red flags, like where the most harm might be happening, rather than getting very stuck in this kind of slightly difficult murky of like, oh, is this quite defined as ReFi or regen, or is it slightly different, which is maybe a more difficult thing to reach a solid conclusion on. But anyway, that might just be a thought, a way to coordinate kind of any serious red flags between leading voices and organizations, communities. So yeah, that's just an idea.
I have a thought on, I have a major red flag that I think especially the Planet project shines out to me. I think for me, regen is by definition connected to the term regenerative and increasing capacity over time. So any short-term games for me are almost automatically not regen by nature. And that's both, I think we can touch upon later, kind of for profit and not for profit, or public good versus data commons. I think there's a lot of discussion to be had there. But I think what we can all agree on, that a game that seems to be infinite, I think this is my challenge, because if something is per design finite and you specify how it's kind of growing and evolving within that finite space, great. But if something claims to be infinite, but it is in reality very short time framed, I think then per definition you can never get to regeneration at the first place, because you're starting to wind down already before you I think to get a bit more kind of natural, like Jogo, it doesn't matter if we use pesticides or not, if we're not even intending to harvest anything at the end, if we're just going to leave it after 2 weeks. And so I think that kind of time frame for me is very relevant. Like regen for me needs to be long-term oriented.
I have nothing to say other than I definitely support that intuition. Like we've been playing around with this similar definition. It's definitely not the same, but I think points us in a similar direction around wisdom. And what we have identified as sort of crucial there is an orientation towards the wholeness. So, you know, not just this narrow definition, not just, you know, right here, just this thing is the thing we're optimizing for, but like the totality of life. And another important aspect that I think resonates with what you mentioned, Luke, is the notion around 7 generations, right? So thinking about a very, very long-term perspective, thinking about not just, you know, between now and next week, or not just now in this quarter, but you know, in the biggest scheme of things we can possibly imagine. I mean, have you ever tried to actually imagine 7 generations from now? You know, my kids. It's just like, you know, the brain melts. It's so far away.
100%. Maybe to kind of give a very practical example of kind of what I said earlier, is that it's so important to do the right thing when you're doing regen, especially if you're thinking 7 generations ahead, because whatever you put in will be amplified so many times and mutate and evolve and grow. Whatever energy you put in the world could have such crazy effects in 7 generations. So I think, therefore, I think by taking that long-term outlook, even if you're not kind of planning for it, because you realistically cannot, but having that notion that whatever I put in will be amplified in 7 generations, therefore it better be really freaking good for all of us. I think is super critical. And to me, as the very essence, I would even say, of Regen, more important even than, yeah, I think that's just the very essence of it.
Which I think also brings in so there's an instance and type thing sort of happening when I think we think about the duration. The duration is a sort of shorthand for also thinking about externalities, which I think also relates to that orientation towards the whole, right? That when we think about not only our intended impact, but also the unintended consequences, the externalities of our actions, the second, third, fourth order consequences. I think that time can be a proxy for that, but it's also an interesting thing in and of itself. Anybody else?
Hey, yes, guys. Yeah, I was writing on the chat, but yeah, that looks sad, the long-term importance. And, many of us here, maybe all of us are communities, I guess. So it's not just a DeFi protocol. And we could agree on a set of certificates, on a set of recognition processes that could build reputation in the long term, slowly, like once a year, participate in the Regen Alliance, something like that. Go to the workshops, go through that, and we just agree to use this data, to use that info, and build a common reputation flow, among all different communities. So we start small, but we can go far away, like a yearly thing. There's no problem or I like to think of 6 months. We in Unconference DAO we found that like separating spring and summer, fall and winter helps a lot. And yeah, we could just certify ourselves, maybe red flag the bad ones and also give an incentive to the good ones.
Yeah, I think in theory, I love the idea of, that kind of thing. But I think in practice, building like a fair reputation system with proper evaluations is like actually a really difficult thing to do, like time and resource intensive, contentious. And like we all kind of have a sense of which are the already projects that are building in the same ethos if you're really in the space. And I think, yeah, from my perspective, I think what's most important is protecting against the plethora of like scams and obvious misrepresentations that are the most damaging to everyone in the space, rather than kind of getting stuck on, who's the most regen aligned to these abstract values, and everyone has, slightly different perceptions, and trying to attach a numerical score to which are the most top regen projects, when we all kind of know the ones that are doing it in the right vibe. But I don't know. That's why I kind of lean towards this more identifying the clear red flags and which ones do we really not want to promote and bring to further community attention as to these are the projects where we're kind of, okay, is there something, I don't know. That's where I'm leaning towards as an easier thing to govern, and yeah, maybe higher value for effort kind of potentially. Anyway, I'm just raising that as a thought, because there's always a lot of ideas around reputation systems and rankings and frameworks and methodologies to do that. And I think they do require a lot. There's already there's BC 100, there's a plethora of different ones that have happened in the past, and then Prime DAO, for example, did ReFi ratings as well, and
I want
they
to
always have a
comment on
struggle
that.
to actually have longevity, right? Like, I think often.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment on I think that, let's say, curation framework, because as I mentioned, I think curation and coordination so important, the very center of how we shape up these movements. And I think I came down to the same conclusion as you did, Monty, and it's actually something I've been bringing up a little bit in the back, is that when I was involved in Prime Down, we did the ReFi Rate-a-thon. It was about kind of trying to appoint quality to set benchmarks. The whole idea was if we're able to show people what is good, they're able to become more good because they have some sort of a reference to work towards. But I think the downside of that is that there will also be this kind of classification, which is just really, really hard because who am I or who is anybody to give a comment on that? Now, what I'm gravitating towards now and what we have actually an MVP for is initially just 3 simple elements that you can have. You can be actually 4, unrated, or no one has taken a look at it or reviewed it. Second, not sure that it's not a scam, which is the worst you can be. It means it's not saying that you're a scam, not saying that you're not a scam. Very likely, I wouldn't say very likely, not sure, not a scam, and it would be have like a badge like uncertain, which is still the end for the person on the other side to judge. Let's take a very juicy example. Climate DAO. Scam, no scam, who's to decide? Did it progress the space? 100%. Did it do good things? Yes. Did it do harm? Yes. Did it do... No one should judge. But what we can say is, hey, there's like 5 or 6 or 7 shaky things that make this uncertain. Judge for yourself. The other one would be most likely not a scam. And that's like, we know that you're probably not trying to scam people. It could still be a scam. And a scam could be different things, right? But this is like most likely not a scam. Let's put Kolektivo in that bucket. I know I'm not trying to scam people, I know, but in the end, tokenomics, design, we might end up realizing something in the world that wasn't our intention or whatever. And then there is the probably or very certainly regen. And there's so many projects that could potentially fit in there. I think if I think about a very practical regen project, I always think about EthicHub, where they really improve on the ground smallholder agriculture and liberating them financially. And as a result, that would probably be one of the few projects, in my opinion, right now that would give probably having a real impact on the world. But I think those 4 categories to me seem to be the most realistic. And then people can still look at the EthicHubs of this world and be like, I want to be more like them. And how can I become more like them? Without having to say, oh, EthicHub is better than Regens Unite, because I don't care. Like, there's no better. But that's kind of where my mind has been moving towards, and something we've been kind of jamming on internally as a way to still help curate, but not kind of judge or opinionize it too much.
I like that. I think it's a really nice way of looking at it. But the only change I might make is the top category could just be like best in class, and that's what the BC 100 have kind of been leaning towards. It's like selecting exemplar projects that like a lot of people, virtually everyone can agree they've stood the test of time, they've actually had material impact, they're kind of like leading projects that everyone's like, yeah, they're doing great, like we can all agree that. And then everyone else is like the main priority is just, are you a scam or not? I don't know. I think that could be an actual nice way of looking at it, really, because there's so many informal kind of projects that will go through this and that, but very few projects actually then make it into this best of class, stood the test of time kind of thing. But
yeah. It's beautiful. Building on that, there's 2 things. Whenever I think about reputation systems, I think about the way that something happens. So when you make some things explicit, especially relationality, right? When we make that very infinite and very like squishy game, when we make it like very concrete, we really open the space up to actually be maximized, right? And now becomes like a specific vector where, oh, now that I can see the rules, this is how I can play that game, which on one hand has, for me, this very negative connotation of like, oh, motherfuckers are going to sneak in there, and then they're going to get they're going to figure out all the ways to trick everyone. But I think there's also an interesting way in which that could be a really good thing. right? If we can actually say, all right, so you want to come manipulate and win all of the favor that you can, but you're producing all of these great externalities as a result of doing that, then hooray for you for wanting to, win the reputation game and get one over on us. So that's interesting. Anybody else?
I found the time component that we were talking about early in the conversation. I found that interesting as like a dimension or a direction. And I would like to add another dimension or direction. Like, does it lead to concrete on the ground action, whether that's like planting trees or doing a permaculture forest or making housing that's like community housing or something like that? And to also perhaps think of like regen or regeneration as like some level different types of strata or horizons that are like working towards the core and like channeling people towards the core, like attracting them in all different places of society, supporting them to like live this lifestyle and make like changes in their life and like systemic changes and end up in like on the ground action. And I guess where I'm trying to go with is that it's like, in a way, it's kind of like a funnel, and it gives like a place for projects that are like working on like inner regeneration or like on social regeneration, whatnot, while not de-emphasizing like what the core of this is like actually like doing the work and having some material impact. And the curation system that you were talking about, that would then also is one thing that would be valuable, like in somewhere of like the higher strata, to like help people find their way into like doing the thing.
Yeah, I think I would slightly maybe push back on the main criteria being having like a measurable like impact on the ground in a weird way, because I feel like it that very much prioritizes like bottoms up, like grassrootsy kind of stuff, and kind of maybe starts to discount like other roles in a like holistic regenerative system, whether it's like facilitation, connection, communication, like whether you're like engaging with the conversation we're having right now. Like, we're not planting a tree, but we're trying to build more regenerative kind of systems in our, how we're discussing it and building towards that. And it's very difficult to like assign that to say, okay, like in some ways. So yeah, I mean it just becomes a challenging thing, I think, for certain types of organizations and products and systems. But obviously we should be kind of trying to maximize for impact, but it can get questionable.
I understand that, and that's also what I'm trying to say. Like, where do these places fit in? And it's perhaps like the way I could most clearly explain it is like, is this call, or is like communication, or is like networking, or like those like I guess those activities that lead to like indirect impact, is that an end in itself, or is that a means to an end? And that doesn't mean that like those things are also valuable or very valuable. But I guess what I'm trying to do is like recognize like the critique that Diogo like put into this conversation in the beginning.
I just think it has the potential to get a bit murky in terms of when you're actually trying to evaluate that. Like, oh, am I having like a knock-on effect, like all the way down the line, that might actually impact the ground? Or like, it's impossible to measure or know that. And so how can you create a kind of classification system around that specific thing, because impact is very, there's a lot of uncertainty and unknowableness about the impact that an organization might be happening. The main thing is, are they operating with integrity, or are they trying to scam and rip people off? And I think if you're having loads of positive impact on the ground or planting trees, and of course you're already going to be celebrating that impact, and people are going to be drawn to you because of that. So it shouldn't necessarily be the focus maybe of this group, would be my posit, but curious people's thoughts on that. I'll shut up now.
A quick take from my side. Yeah, I think it would be quite challenging to try to evaluate this kind of somehow like secondary kind of impact. But I think it could be like quite valuable to be aware of that and to like recognize the value that it can bring, like to basically facilitate the real like on the ground impact, basically. So maybe let's say like a ReFi protocol may not be having any direct impact on the ground, but it may be facilitating the tokenization of the real world impact and then the flow of funds to these actions, for instance. So yeah, I think it's good to kind of like be able to recognize all the necessary kind of facilitation that needs to be there basically for something to work. And yeah.
And there's a couple interesting bits, right? So I do want to come back to Monty. I think that absolutely we should do the red team, like the bullshit alarm. Like that should be a group. There should be like some place where people know, hey, this is where we upregulate signal for bullshit and obvious scams. That's very low effort, very high value. There's a couple other threads that I go, yeah, I definitely recognize what you're describing, that if we think about like second order impact, that's hard. That's very hard, right? And there's something that makes me go, but it would be good. Like even if it is as silly as this seems at the face value of like steps to tree, like how many steps does my action have till trees going in the ground, just to be a little silly with it. But I think that that's already a good start, because there's something in there that is really hard, but also does really matter, which is like just the attendance to the space that nurtures, right? Like there's something about it. If I think about, you use the example of facilitation, I can see that's a really, like, to me, a great example of it does something that's very obvious, that's very there, but it's also very hard to see. And I think it's in trying to understand and make legible those types of things that's actually a really interesting and positive exercise, even if it's very, very hard to do, and even like and sometimes downright impossible to make tangible. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, I don't want to like change the subject, change the direction of the conversation. I'm sure actually, if it got very, very social. Yeah, use social care, social concerns for sure. Yeah, as for long term, because that's social thing. That's why I was doing regeneration on the field only. We put internet here. I said, yes, I'm going to study this thing. I'm going to start doing this socially using tech tools. Let's get more force, more strength. And that, in the long term, that means, having shared, validated, recognized certificates, where we can say, oh, this person is a Regen Unite. He's been there. He's with them. And like I just keep I think Regen Alliance is so important for this. And now I dropped this question to Max and Luis and Inez that's here too, and all the mentors over there. Like, are we getting certificates, sir?
Sure thing.
And this thing, I again, like, hard things that I think are worth doing. I would love to see us do, as stupid as this is, and I know this one is very stupid. Like, I would love to see us do some form of fucking impact awards, like to do like your traditional, like maybe not traditional, but think like big fucking red carpet, flashing lights, and get up in your fucking best dressed and like have a fucking impact award show, and do the fucking award speech and show like vignettes of lots of different projects and go, hey, ask the community where they think the impact is. I know in some ways, like Gitcoin and quadratic funding is sort of doing this in a very tangible way, but there's something around the spectacle, especially, right? That is, if you're looking at it, it's quite there, but the thing that I'm still missing is, and maybe we just don't have the ability, quite frankly, is projecting it up on the big fucking screen at the scale or size of the stadium to really let folks know that, hey, if this shit looks cool to you, this is where the action is. Because it's super easy. I mean, I know that I've sort of slipped on a banana peel and fallen down this rabbit hole, and this has become my world, and the people and players that are a part of it are very like obvious to me, like motherfuckers that show up are doing the thing. Everybody else, I don't know. But I think if you're not here in the context of this call, like there's something that I would love to see, which is like, how can we make a dent in the collective consciousness of like really raising the meme up to a space to give people the opportunity of being like, oh, that shit is dope, number one, and that's what I want to spend my more of my time and attention on. Anybody else?
I think quickly from my side, I really like the idea and kind of like how to, yeah, have these kind of things. And I wonder how it would be possible, like, to have a reach beyond what is already there, basically, what is already there in the ReFi region space and so on, because it's quite hard, like, for us to be kind of in a somehow like little bubble, but not necessarily in the bad sense, and how to have like a wider reach so that other people can see that and find, oh, that's pretty cool. I would like to eventually like be there as well, or something like that. And I'd like to connect that to how there could possibly be more cultural production in the ReFi like region space. I think some kind of like examples would be, for instance, like the Regens Unite events that can do like the on the ground like activities like building with culture and so on. But for instance, like even the ReFi roundup from ReFi DAO, I think it's like a really good resource for. I think it's like really good to have some like a platform in which people can come and like write articles about like these topics and so on, and have something to share, like have something that can be like the gateway for people to join the movement as well. And just kind of connecting with that slightly.
Okay, I guess we're slowly coming to the closure of it. I would like to quickly recap the things that stick to my mind. I'm loving this 7 generations idea. It seems like creating the channel and identifying red flag projects seems something worth trying. I'm had thought a lot about the impact evaluations complexities and importance, and that there are probably like there's such a thing called ecosystem services, which consist not only about like production services like food, but also regulational or cultural. So there might be some ideas how we can value, for example, the facilitators' work. Certification might be a cool thing. Also, it can be like a cool, spectacular impact awards show. This is seems at least fun on the surface, and that we can even maybe identify those projects through like a Gitcoin round, seeing who's like trending and so on for the initial selection. So that was my recap. I'm really thankful for all of you for having the session, and I'm amazed and probably will process the insight much longer from it. We can, of course, find a time if there is a desire to continue that whenever you feel like that. And yeah, if anybody else feeling like sharing some final words, please.
Yeah, thanks for putting this group together, and it seems like there's some tangible places to start, and kind of can progress from there. So appreciate Max, you pulling us together, and been an interesting conversation.
Okay.
Thank you, Max.
100%. This is the vibe. Thanks, Max. Thanks everybody for showing up and dropping into the vibe.
Thank you.
Nice. Cheers, everyone.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.